Hello, everyone. Greetings from my cozy, warm home. I hope you're somewhere warm and nice too. Looking at the weather right now, I suppose we probably could have gone and done the class, but hey, I don't have winter tires on yet because I'm irresponsible. So let's do it remote. I've been doing some other stuff today. I gave a guest lecture at Mohawk College, and then after that, I tried to think exactly about how I'm going to integrate the techno-fascism angle into this lecture. I don't know that I'm entirely successful. We'll get to it. It's a bit all over the place. I think I'm giving you a bit too much, frankly. I think this could be 2 weeks or more easily. And I certainly think you have too much to read and watch. On that note, right at the beginning here, let me say that I think the most important thing, well, you've got the one thing to read, right, which is the Marshall McLuhan. At the very end, I'm going to come to the McLuhan and hopefully explain why I chose that. In terms of stuff to watch, the Alexander Avila essay on the tech billionaire to fascist pipeline is the one that I'm primarily going to recommend, with the Angela Collier AI does not exist video as a close second. The other two are kind of supplemental. But as usual, read and watch the stuff that seems the most interesting to you and the stuff that your TA is the most interested in themselves. Okay, so this stuff. Let's deal with the lecture itself. First off, of course, there are assignments that continue to be due. Last week's affect and social norm stuff is due today. Hopefully that's in. Next week is the time when you will hand in the AI assignment, and we will talk about that at the end. Let's get into it. So to start with, AI is everywhere. We all know this. It's in the music. This is from a few years ago now, how ostensibly machine learning was going to get a John Lennon song disarticulated and blah, blah, blah. And fine. More contemporaneously, today I found out that the top of the Billboard Digital Country Music Chart is an AI artist. Oh, what's the name? It's like Traveling Rust or something like that. It's got Rust in the title. I listened to the track. It's not bad. Uh, so we're certainly having AI populate these different creative industries, right? We can see this too in the grand world of video games, where, of course, you can imagine replacing all kinds of quest design and interaction and so on with AI engines. Here's a quotation from Strauss Zelnick, the CEO. Strauss Zelnick, what a name. The CEO of Take-Two, talking about how interactions between players and NPCs are normally scripted, and that's generally not very interesting, whereas AI can generate interesting and fun dialogue trees. As a player and sincere lover of video games, this upsets me deeply. And of course, you see AI being trumpeted as a cure-all for the woes of the movie industry. You could drop the cost by 90%, says Jeff Katzenberg. If you want to hear that from the horse's mouth, you can take a look at that YouTube link. In addition to the realm of culture, AI is used just about everywhere else. The one most heinous example that I've chosen to highlight here is the use of a system called Lavender, which, along with a system called Where's Daddy, would identify primary targets for the Israeli Defense Force to bomb during the Gaza genocide. Go and read The Guardian's reporting on this if you would like to know more. So, here's a quick little survey of gross AI stuff that I find reprehensible. Fine, so what? We all know about this. Everyone knows what AI is these days. I want to make a case that we should understand artificial intelligence in terms of desire. And let me explain what I mean by that. So, here's another example on the screen of how AI is being used, or how CEOs are fantasizing AI will be used in the world of video games. Here we see a screenshot on the left from BioShock Infinite, and on the right, an artist's or an AI agent's, I don't know, imagination of what BioShock Infinite would look like if your graphics card had control over the graphics as opposed to the developer of the game. Now, if you're just listening to this, please do glance at the screen because the visuals are pretty important here, right? And the primary concern, the primary question is, who is this for? Who is this for? It's probably for typical, average gamers, right? Who you are imagining as cishet guys, probably, who are then going to be attracted to neotenous-looking women with gigantic, way too big eyes and childlike features. Right, which you see in the original character design too, but here it's really emphasized and intensified. Why is it presented that way? Well, because of the male gaze, right? Because we like looking at pretty girls in games and elsewhere. This is one of the things that AI can do. It can give us pretty people to look at. And I'd like to present a slightly sillier but still cishet example of the male gaze here in the realm of Twitter. I think this is from last year that I found this from TrueAnon. You may know them. They're a wonderful podcast who found what Brace Belden describes here as a really good Twitter account. I think this is how people will be horny in the future. Because this Twitter account features Linda Yaccarino. Linda Yaccarino, of course, is the former CEO of Twitter. How long did she hold the position for? This screenshot from Wikipedia is about a year old too. Anyway, I don't think she's the CEO of Twitter any longer, but as you can see from Wikipedia here, she is a 60-year-old woman with children who does not look at all like what we saw on the screen previously. A young, again, somewhat neotenous Linda Yaccarino. Now let's go on to some other examples of how that Linda Yaccarino Twitter account does its thing. I find this really funny, personally. So here you have the Linda Yaccarino parody account saying, your account is tiny, your account is microscopic, and TrueAnon interpreting it as someone jacking off to AI-generated images of Linda Yaccarino telling them their account is small. Weird stuff. Properly weird. God, I kind of adore it. I mean, this seems like such obvious shitposting. And if you're going to be using AI for anything shitposting, I give you sanction to do that. Go ahead and shitpost your way into the horrible future. And it doesn't just have to be sexual, this desire business, right? Because what we saw in the previous slides was obviously an object of cishet male desire presented on screen for cishet men. And boys, and that's the kind of thing that, you can imagine a certain kind of attraction coding onto. But it's not just that. Like I say, it's not just sex. There's other things that we can desire in the realm of social media as well. I have an example here about my desire for social affirmation. I, replied to something that Natalie Wynn, aka ContraPoints, posted on Twitter at one point, and she liked it, and I felt seen. And I have a desire to be recognized, right? I don't have much of a social media presence. I got you guys listening to me, which I am profoundly and endlessly grateful for. And you're paying for it. This is weird. But I don't want people to pay for it. I want people to come and hear what I have to say on the internet just because they're interested in me. And look at that. A celebrity, a video essayist I respect, asterisk, recognized me. Didn't that feel good? Some of you might take classes with Mark Allwood. You made it, he observes. And this kind of thing happens not just in the form of like proper recognition from actual human beings, like Natalie Wynn, who was directly replying to me. It also happens through system-generated cues of the exact same sort that we were talking about last lecture. Right? How there's these things like bandwagon cues that tell you when other folks are paying attention and encourage you to pay attention as well. Things like the little red notifications informing you that you have something to click on and read, so on and so forth. And Twitter, once you have done better than your normal set of impressions, will also tell you about that. 1.7 thousand impressions on your post in the last 7 days. Ooh, that sounds like a big number. And look at that, 2.5 thousand. Even bigger. This is servicing my need to be recognized. So there is a sense in which artificial intelligence then is straightforwardly, and I'm also going to toss social media in there too. Obviously, something like me being recognized on Twitter is not the same as AI, though God knows there's AI built into how a lot of different algorithms work. But AI and social media is about desire, right? Some kind of longing, some kind of unsatisfied thing, connection between two entities or people. And I mean desire in a pretty broad sense. Those of you in Aaron's seminar may get to talk a little bit about what Alexander Avila does in that essay with regard to Deleuze and Guattari and how they understand desire. Let's bracket that. If you've got Aaron as your TA, ask them. But I do have this broad, expansive conception of desire, which is, like I say, not just about sex, not just about recognition, not just about the things that we normally desire, power, money, status, clout, whatever, but is instead simply about how things kind of come together and get articulated. Now, I'm going to leave that largely to the side, though, and like I say, Aaron and Alexander Avila can pick that up. I'm mostly just talking about desire in the common sense here, at least for now. We're going to complexify it a little bit as time goes on. But you'll note that this is very loose, right? This phrasing is about. And I'm not doing any university skills stuff this week, so let's call this that. This phrasing, something is about something else, is not precise, right? It's just talking about a casual connection between things. But it's the kind of casual connection that you can, with a bit of work and research and thinking, turn into a causal connection, an explanatory connection, where you can say one thing leads to another thing, one thing contains another thing, right? So I think starting with X is about Y, X is related in some vague general, I don't know what kind of fashion, to Y, is a really useful way of structuring your thought about culture and media, right? Just simple juxtaposition. How do two things that you are lining up in front of you relate? And when I say here that AI is about desire, I mean to point to the variety of different ways in which people, for lack of a nicer way of putting it, get off on AI. Right? We've got the Linda Yaccarino thing. We've got me seeking the approval of people on the internet. We've got various different video game CEOs who are saying that they're going to save a whole bunch of money. All these are things that people value, right? They're things that are going to bring us pleasure, that we desire, and that we see AI as providing for us. So this is kind of the angle that I'm going to be taking for the lecture, is to talk about artificial intelligence in this semi-psychoanalytical sense in terms of what it is that we want, how we can get it, how technology is going to deliver it to us. For the clearest and funniest example of this, I'll go ahead and encourage you to click that link on the screen right now. Eddie Burbank has a pretty fun and profoundly depressing video about Apple's augmented reality, virtual reality, face glass things. What are they called? This came out like a year ago and I haven't heard anything about it since. Anyway, here in this video, you're going to see Eddie being propositioned by various potential AI girlfriends who are going to assuage his sadness and give him someone to talk to in his loneliest lonelinesses. Like I say, funny, it's a good time, and throughout this lecture, I'm going to be pointing you to some sources if you want to see more. If we were in class together, we just watch it. Okay, so that's the brief prolegomenon. We got the intro here. Artificial intelligence is in some sense about desire. Very good. But we still need to talk about what artificial intelligence is. And for that, I'm again going to point you to the video. Angela Collier's video, AI Does Not Exist, But It Will Ruin Everything Anyway, is great. The first 5 minutes or so of it are an extended, very loose example of how artificial intelligence works. And it demonstrates quite clearly that machine learning does not equate to intelligence. Now, you probably know this. If you don't know this already, like I say, watch the first 5 minutes of this video. She is a PhD in astrophysics who works with machine learning systems all the time and understands stuff quite well. She's also a gifted science communicator who can talk about it far better than I could. Check it out. But hopefully you do know already that artificial intelligence is not intelligent. It is a lie. The term is a marketing gimmick That's all. It's a marketing gimmick that is currently generating one of the largest bubbles in the history of the United States stock market and is undoubtedly going to lead to all of our immiseration. And our library is offering courses in how to use it, and it makes me sad. I'll also note that AI, as it is used in the common parlance, which mostly relates to, like I say, machine learning, is not the same as artificial general intelligence at all. And when people are thinking about AI, they're mostly thinking about artificial general intelligence. And the rough distinction there just has to do with the capacities of the two, and specifically the capacities to do a whole bunch of different kinds of things, to integrate unrelated forms of data, collate them, compare them, and then be able to, make independent decisions, to grow, all kinds of stuff, right? Imagine data from Star Trek. Imagine Deus Ex Machina. Deus Ex Machina? Ex Machina. Imagine various different kinds of science fictive depictions of artificial intelligence. That's what artificial general intelligence is. We've got this definition on the screen. From Wikipedia. If realized, an AGI could learn to accomplish any intellectual task that human beings or animals could perform. AI alternatively has been defined as an autonomous system that surpasses human capabilities in the majority of economically valuable tasks. So it's a goal of research. It ain't real. It doesn't exist. It may never exist. The artificial general intelligence, the AGI, is a goal of AI researchers, but also of futurologists, right? Of people who study science fiction, or don't even study science fiction, who read some science fiction, who like to engage in acts of ficting the science. Ficting the scientific? What would be the verb form there? Don't matter. They are all, not all, but generally, frequently, also believers in something called the singularity. You may not have heard of the singularity before. Maybe you've heard of black holes. They have a singularity inside them. You've probably heard the word singular, but the singularity has a particular meaning within those cultures. And I want to talk about it because this, again, brings us back to and through the idea of desire. So I said before, when you're thinking about AGI, you're probably thinking of science fiction examples. So the movie Her, for instance, about the immaculately well-dressed Joaquin Phoenix falling in love with his artificial intelligence operating system. Great film, and it depicts the singularity. Without going into too many spoilers about a decade-old movie, this is one that takes you through. Likewise, so does Ex Machina, is my understanding. I still haven't actually watched this one. This still leaves the question of what the singularity is. Let's talk about that. It's a concept that comes out of science fiction writing, literature in the first place. And I'm going to define it in a bit, but let's just go through some of this literature, as though we were moving through time ourselves. So Vernor Vinge, in Marooned in Real Time here, writes this story about a group of archaeologists who stumble upon a future civilization and are looking back at its, or they are from the future looking back at the past, right? And wondering what must have happened. So by 2200, we could increase human intelligence itself. And intelligence is the basis of all progress. My guess is that by mid-century, any goal you can state objectively without internal contradictions, could be achieved. And what would things be like 50 years after that? There would still be goals, and there would still be striving, but not what we could understand. To call that time the extinction is absurd. It was a singularity, a place where extrapolation breaks down and new models must be applied. And those new models are beyond our intelligence. So Vernor Vinge here speculating that a group of future archaeologists are going to look back on this time in the mid-2200s and note that they could do anything because of the technology, right? Imagine it can exist. We've got replicators, we've got whatever futuristic technology you want. At that point, we don't know what life is going to be like. It'll be real weird because the machines, in order to do those things for us, well, they're going to have to be vastly superior to us. We can't solve all problems. right? We can't complete any goal objectively. We can't do that, but machines maybe could. They'd have to be kind of like magic though, right? Truly possessed of remarkable capacities. And if they're like that, if they're post-human, then we can't imagine it. In the same way that, as with a black hole, once you get past the event horizon, you have no idea what is there, right? Scientifically, we speculate about a singularity inside of a black hole, but we really don't know. Our extrapolation breaks down. New models must be applied. I really like this alternative articulation of the singularity. This is from Charles Stross, Accelerando. Really, really fun book that, again, takes you all the way through it from the perspective of a human. Around the world, laboring women produce 45,000 babies a day, representing 1,023 millions of instructions per second of processing power. Also around the world, fab lines casually churn out 30 million microprocessors a day, representing 10 to the 23 MIPS. In another 10 months, most of the MIPS being added to the solar system will be machine-hosted for the first time. About 10 years after that, the solar system's installed processing power will nudge the critical 1 MIPS per gram threshold, 1 million instructions per second per gram of matter. After that, singularity, a vanishing point beyond which extrapolating progress becomes meaningless. The time remaining before the intelligence spike is down to single-digit years. So same basic logic, right? We don't know what's going to happen. It's a singularity. At that point, artificial intelligence is going to run away doing its own thing, and we poor benighted humans will have to interact with it and each other in a very weird and new way that we don't yet know anything about. This logic has been predicted, hypothesized for some time, and it pertains to the nature of transistors and Moore's law. You can see the singularity here visualized on screen, right? We might be getting slowly smarter, maybe, arguably, depending on how you measure intellect. I've got my real problems with IQ. But you can see that, at least in this kind of silly depiction, machine intelligence has been rapidly increasing. And the speculation, of course, has always been that at some time in the 2000s or the 2100s or whenever you would have it, the machines will become smarter than humans because they have those millions of instructions per second, because they can work so very, very quickly, and they have access to so much information. And at that point, we're going to hit the singularity, and there will be a massive departure in which the human and the transhuman will radically divide. I said that this is related to Moore's law. Moore's law is the idea that the number of transistors on a microchip doubles every 2 years. Going back to the 50s, 60s, and 70s and so forth, we can see a fairly straightforward line up until the mid-2010s when things start to slow down and fall off a bit. There is speculation that this law doesn't work anymore. Well, I don't know if there's speculation so much as actual information and studies. I'm not a scientist, but my understanding is that there are hard limits due to the the Planck scale, due to the fact that you can only okay, transistors. Hold on, let's slow down. Let's talk about transistors. Transistors shoot electrons, they shunt electrons either left or right, 0 or 1. The electron goes this way or it goes that way. And computer chips are basically a whole bunch of these logic gates that are shunting electrons in one direction or another, depending on how much voltage is passing through the transistors, through the chips. Yeah? Okay, straightforward. The thing is, electrons do have size, some kind of size, and there's a point at which it's you can't manipulate them anymore. We're not that far away from that point. I probably should have reviewed my notes on this more properly before I started talking about this because I feel like I'm flubbing it. Anyway, rough idea is beyond 10 nanometers, a 10 nanometer electron gate, it's very hard to go further, and we're pretty rapidly approaching that kind of hard limit. So the idea that Moore's law would carry on forever and ever is very unlikely. We were not going to achieve the singularity just by having better computer chips, right? Now, more of them, okay, that's a different story. God knows we can just keep cranking out more and more chips. This is why NVIDIA is doing so damn well. In any case, people have for a long time looked at Moore's law and speculated about how this law in and of itself is necessarily going to lead to the singularity. I really like these popular figurations of the singularity that you get on places like Reddit's r/singularity, because they reveal something about these people's desires. And I think they're different than the science fictive configurations of it too. Where something like Accelerando or Marooned in Space-Time, they've got perspectives about the social and the political in them, but they're not like looking to the singularity to solve the problems of the world. They're just wondering what it's going to be like when that happens. Reddit, on the other hand, and lots of other places too, really do want to look to AI to solve problems for us. At the bottom here of the screenshot, we have someone speculating about how an AI government is the solution to rampant corruption, elitism, and wealth hoarding. This is bananas to me. But it's premised on a faith that there's something in AI, something post-human, something better than human, that's going to get us away from all of these messy humanistic problems. Ugh, yuck. Assuredly, the reason that we have wealth inequality and disease and war and all of these pathetic human problems is that we're just not rational enough. And if we had a machine, a perfectly rational machine, then we wouldn't have these human social problems anymore. And wouldn't that be wonderful? So here again, you've got desire, right? You've got this fantasizing about a future that will exist, must exist, that I need to exist. And that kind of fantasizing is very much about what it is that you want, right? What you love, what you're afraid of, what you hope to see in the world one day. Istvan Cicerí-Roné talks about this idea in The Seven Beauties of Science Fiction. I'm just going to read a quotation out from this excellent book. Kudos to the editor of Science Fiction Studies, Veronica Hollinger, who used to be a professor at this department, for pointing this out to me. Cicerí-Roné writes, "The singularity is a condensation and displacement of technoculture's overwhelming anxieties and desires. Its self-propagating insulation from history, from generations of striving and suffering beings, and from communication with others whom it considers its technocultural inferiors, that is, us, crystallizes the hopes of a technological elite to escape from the condition that it already enjoys. The acceleration toward the singularity represents the escape velocity necessary to get free from the entanglements of technology in the life world. Ironically, it is a fiction, specifically science fiction, that makes this escape seem possible." So this, I think, is kind of at the heart of this lecture and my take on AI, and we'll get to it, technofascism in general. It's this desperate desire for an escape from the human, escape from the condition that it already enjoys, which is to say, freedom, the terrible, yawning abyss of freedom. Because the technological elite, they're free. They already can do anything that they want, right? But they're not ultimately free. They don't have all of the freedoms. They aren't in perfect control. They aren't immortal. They're going to one day die, just like you and me. And that is a very, very difficult fact for a certain kind of person, or a certain kind of aspiring person, to countenance. Peter Thiel is one of these such people. Do you know who Peter Thiel is? I feel like I've talked about him in this class, but I feel like I talk about him all the time. You might not. Let's talk about Peter Thiel. So this is Peter Thiel. He is a Silicon Valley entrepreneur. He co-founded PayPal with his good bud, Elon Musk. They're not actually good buds. They hate each other. Back in the late 1990s. And since then, he has, and before that, he was at Stanford with Rene Girard and, did some work with like a student journal there that he founded. Like there was insufficient conservative like publications on Stanford's campus. And he's got a really fascinating history. There's a great book by Max Chafkin called The Contrarian about him, if you're curious. Anyway, The long story short is that he went from co-founding PayPal to being extraordinarily wealthy and being a venture capitalist, an angel who gives money out to promising startups that are doing work that he's interested in. Hoo boy, the kinds of projects he's supported. Let's go into them. So, Facebook. Not Palantir. Peter Thiel was Facebook's one of their earliest angel investors, giving Mark Zuckerberg like 500 grand, not a huge sum of money, but still way back in the day, would have been around 2003, 2004. Peter Thiel is one of these guys, and I think he's actually the guy who loved careers like that of Mark Zuckerberg, because Zuckerberg, he was in school, Harvard, I think, right, in order to become like a proper computer programmer and get his degree and all that stuff. And then after he made thefacebook.com, he didn't need to pursue education anymore. Thiel is very much opposed to education. He wants to see young people out there in the world building. It's a particularly gross verb that I might talk about in a bit. And so he saw in Zuckerberg a builder. He invested, and his investment paid massive dividends because, of course, Facebook became very quickly the largest social media site in the world. Meta is massively significant and influential, blah, blah, blah. We know the story about that. And he was on the board of directors for Facebook for a couple of decades. I don't think he is any longer, but I haven't checked that recently. Thiel is also the chairman of Palantir. He co-founded it back in 2003 with who I believe is the current CEO, Alex Karp, and a couple other guys. Palantir is a big data company, a data analytics company. They do work on predictive policing. They have partnered with the Department of Defense. They are kind of terrifying. And if you want to know more about Palantir, I'm going to point you to the Alexander Avila video essay and to a quick Google search. All I'm doing right now, I'm not digging into any one of these of Peter Thiel's investments and projects in great detail. I'm just trying to paint a big, broad picture. So let's move on to some of the weirder, wackier stuff, because honestly, it's no surprise that a guy like Peter Thiel is in bed with the American military. This is one of Peter Thiel's weirder projects. Aubrey de Grey probably still is, the guy running something what was once called the Methuselah Foundation and is now called, last I checked, Strategies for Engineered Negligible Senescence, the SENS Foundation. And his whole thing is that we should be using technology in order to defeat mortality. That aging and dying is the necessity of aging and dying, rather, is a trance. And we need to wake up from that trance because there are 7 different genetic phenomena, corporeal phenomena, biological phenomena, that constitute death. And if we could take those 7 different things and address each one of them, then nobody's got to die no more. You don't have to have your telomeres shortened over time or whatever the precise genetic stuff is. And so one of the things that Peter Thiel fantasizes about and desperately wishes to have happen is immortality, right? So he funds these kinds of projects. Thiel has given to the Methuselah Foundation. He's a big booster of Aubrey de Grey's work. Thiel also is one of the contributors to the Singularity Institute, who do similar kinds of things. This list goes on and on, right? There's more and more stuff like this that's just focused on some nebulous future transition in technology. My other favorite example of this isn't so much about technology, like the development of it, of something science fictive, but rather the deployment of the technologies that we already have in slightly novel ways. Seasteading, for instance. If you want to watch a hilariously old video from the Seasteading Institute about this, it's Bioshock. It's Bioshock. They want to have cities at sea beyond the reach of mortal governments and their mortal laws, and they want no gods, no kings, only men. Men building. Again, it's a fantasy of escape, right? We've got a fantasy of escape from mortality. We've got a fantasy of escape from the boundaries of the nation and of laws and so on and so forth, escape from social norms. Thiel wants to get away. Even Facebook, right? Even his support of Mark Zuckerberg is about escape. It's escaping into the cybernetic, right? Into the world of social media, which is, of course, a freer place than the human world. And also, Thiel is a grand supporter of Donald Trump. He has been an advisor to Trump. He's donated to his campaign. Thiel and Trump love each other very dearly, insofar as Trump or Thiel are capable of love, I suppose. So, in addition to all this stuff, Peter Thiel, of course, has philanthropic organizations, propagandistic organizations. The Thiel Foundation is one of these. Its objective is to defend and promote freedom in all its dimensions, political, personal, and economic. Another way of saying this is to say that Peter Thiel is a libertarian who believes intensely in libertarianism, which just roughly is the idea that we should have little to no government, that people should be free to do whatever they want, that the individual is in charge of their own destiny, and we shouldn't interfere with them any more than absolutely necessary. That's roughly speaking what libertarianism is. If you're 12, it's a very, very persuasive philosophy. If you really don't like the fact that your mom wants you to clean your room, you could be a libertarian. If you're older than 12 and you're still a libertarian, I think you've vastly misapprehended just the nature of the world. The thing about Thiel's libertarianism is that it's really directed against what he understands to be the enemies of libertarianism. As the Thiel Foundation puts it, freedom is always under siege, and therefore Thiel and libertarians like him have a duty to fight back. What are they fighting? Thiel writes, this is from, I think, 2009, The Education of a Libertarian in Cato Unbound, which is a libertarian journal. Thiel writes, I no longer believe that freedom and democracy are compatible. Freedom is the thing, right? That's what libertarians want. Democracy is the enemy. Democracy is what is putting freedom under siege. The broader education of the body politic has become a fool's errand, Thiel writes. It's not possible to convince the broader body politic to become libertarians. You ain't gonna do it. They're not smart enough for that, not like Peter Thiel and the rest of Silicon Valley. So don't try. We are in a deadly race between politics and technology. So Thiel genuinely thinks that democracy, that politics, that the social is the enemy, and it has to be conquered. It needs to be defeated. He understands technology and democracy to be different things, right? Qualitatively different, as though technology itself is not political and doesn't do political work, as though it isn't the, instantiation, the materialization of the political, like what is infrastructure, but just like politics visualized and rendered under our feet. And so he has this really, again, naive conception of this contest between politics and technology, as though if we just have the right technologies, like being able to avoid death, being able to avoid laws, being able to avoid each other, that then we could finally, through technology, get away from all of this, finally solve all of these problems, right? That's the kind of future that he wants. Thiel's libertarianism isn't particularly new. Something like what we're going to talk about here in terms of the Californian ideology has been around for a long time, at least since the 1990s. We could go back to the 1960s. And the precedents for it, hold on. Okay, here's what I want to say. It's not new. What's new about Thiel and libertarianism and the Californian ideology is the extent of its connection to the levers of power, right? Because Thiel is best buds with Donald Trump. Someone like J.D. Vance is a Thiel acolyte. Of course, Thiel is like at the heart of a whole bunch of different Silicon Valley-based projects as well, not to mention, the American government and finance and so on. So it's that these people are in positions of power now where they didn't used to be. But the ideology is more or less consistent over time. And that ideology is something that Richard Barbrook and Andy Cameron in 1995 described as the Californian ideology. And just real quick side note here, ideology, kind of a big word. There's a million different ways in which that we can use it. The one that they're referring to, the way that they're referring to ideology here is like a coherent system of beliefs, a more or less coherent system of beliefs. And in the case of the Californian ideology, it's definitely on the less side of things. But, a system of ideas, an explanation for how the world works. You can also understand it as an unconscious set of assumptions about things, but that's not really how they're using it here. Anyway, they describe the Californian ideology as an anti-statist gospel of high-tech libertarianism, a bizarre mishmash of hippie anarchism and economic liberalism, beefed up with lots of technological determinism. So, this is Thiel, right? He is a libertarian. He does not believe in the state. He wants to destroy it. He's absolutely an economic liberal, right? He's a capitalist, and he believes that technology is going to launch us into the future and that can't be stopped. Fine. What makes this bizarre? Well, it's all the hippie stuff, right? It's the fact that Peter Thiel is gay. Very famously, Peter Thiel was outed by Gawker. Maybe you've heard of Gawker magazine, maybe not. They were an online publication for a good long time, and Gawker, for whatever reason, really didn't like Peter Thiel, and they ran all kinds of stories about him and made it publicly known that he was gay, at which point Peter Thiel paid the legal bills of Hulk Hogan, who was suing Gawker, because Gawker had also gotten their hands on footage of Hulk Hogan having sex with Bubba the Love Sponge's wife. No joke, all of this is true. You should go look it up. It's a fascinating story. This is to say that Peter Thiel destroyed Gawker for outing him as a gay man. Sidebar. So this is weird in that there are some inconsistencies, right? Like libertarianism kind of explains it. Most libertarians are fine with homosexuality, or you can do whatever you want to do. You can love whoever you want to love. Who am I to interfere? The government shouldn't be involved in that, right? What is in the bedroom stays in the bedroom, that kind of thing. And libertarians are also, of course, in favor of legalizing drugs and so on and so forth. But it's a little bit inconsistent with some of the other isms, right, that are bound up in the Californian ideology. So let's just keep talking about these in turn. Of course, the Californian ideology is capitalist. It's based in Silicon Valley. People who follow this ideology, whether deliberately or not, are capitalists. But they're also communalists. Fred Turner has this great book From Counterculture to Cyberculture, where he talks about the communalist origins of this stuff in the 1960s. People like Stuart Brand and Kevin Kelly, who founded the Whole Earth catalog, and the Whole Earth Electronic Well, all that stuff. Wired magazine, like this came out of them. They were all doing drugs and hanging out in Fuller domes, naked, blasted on peyote, and having a great time in the 1960s, and then they all became, captains of industry as time went on. But in principle, they're communalists, right? They think that we can do things by coming together with technology as a mediator. And with regard to technology, they also believe that it's necessarily going to develop, that things are only ever going to get more technologized, and that itself is going to be good, right? Technological determinism is the belief that that technology in and of itself drives social change, and that it is necessary and inevitable and a good thing. Californian ideology is also a cybernetic totalist ideology, which is to say it reckons that the world can be perfectly rendered in model form, that you can map out everything that is, and that in mapping out everything that is and understanding how everything relates to everything else, you can then exert perfect systemic control over it, at least in principle. This is the cybernetic part. I find this silly. I find all of this stuff silly. We could talk about why if we were in person. The Californian ideology is also transhumanist, which is to say it thinks that the human is something that is kind of, limited, obviously. We've got our human limitations, and that these limitations are bad and should be transcended, and that using technology is the way to transcend the limitations of the human. So don't just think here in terms of implants and prostheses, though do think about those. You can also think about things like biohacking, right? Ensuring that you're consuming exactly the right amount of protein and stuff like that. That's all on a spectrum of transhumanism. And of course, last but not least, the Californian ideology encapsulates singularitarianism, the notion that the singularity is just around the corner, 2045. That's what, Kurzweil says, something like that. I think that the way that we need to update Barbrook and Cameron's definition is with one more ism, because I think there's one ideology missing from this list. That ideology is fascism. I'm going to run a whole course on fascism starting in the spring at the fourth year level, and it's a lot. There's a lot to talk about, and so I'm not going to make an effort to give you a systematic definition of fascism or techno-fascism here. This is going to be more gestural than anything. But just off the cuff, when you're thinking about fascism, you're probably thinking about like the Nazis. Perhaps you are thinking about the black shirts in Italy. Maybe you're thinking about Franco's Spain. Maybe you're thinking about ICE raids in Chicago. Those are all reasonable things to keep in mind when you're thinking of fascism, right? The latent forms, the overt forms, whatever. Fascism is, in the words of Roger Griffin, palingenetic ultranationalism. It is the hearkening back to a time that never was, in hopes of a rebirth for the nation, right? It's a kind of weird, nostalgic mythology. And it involves strength and passion and violence, and more than anything else, and this is really how I tend to boil this down, it's just about a complete intolerance of difference. Fascists cannot tolerate that which is different from them. It's an autoimmune kind of disease, like a social body autoimmune kind of disease, which begins with attacking the other and then necessarily, ultimately, turns back on itself. It results in murder-suicide. It's cancer. Fascism is a kind of political cancer. Tons to say about this, but techno-fascism, I think, is emphatically what someone like Peter Thiel is looking for. He wouldn't put it in those terms, but some of his boosters and some of the people that he draws on for his beliefs absolutely would, and unapologetically so. So let's talk about it. Here's a bunch of examples. So, it's really not that hard these days, depressingly, to find examples of fascism out in the wild, to find examples of of AI-generated memes that are doing the work of fascist propaganda for the American government. Here's what I've got for you today. I strongly encourage you guys to check out the Homeland Security Twitter account, DHS.gov. It's brutal, man. I've roughly grouped these different, like I say, AI-generated memes in terms of what it is that they're advocating. In this case, a bunch of things that are just, about the elimination of the migrant threat, of the illegal alien, right? Victory is within reach. Recapture our national identity. It's October 3rd, a great day for deportations. Communist denied. Terrorist denied. Globalist denied. Dark times, folks. Let's do some others. No, wait. This is still more of the expel, exterminate stuff. Hold on. When's the next one coming? Let's see. We know what it means to be an American. We know what it means to not be American. It's the wrong skin color. Here are some examples that relate to nostalgia. There's lots and lots of visualizations of a past that must have been, that we could return to. Return with a capital V instead of a U. The Homeland Security Twitter account is literally doing that, right? We share one heart, one home, one past, one glorious destiny. Decide what our nation will become. Remember your first thrill of American liberty. Back in the days when immigrants had the right skin color. That's what this is, right? It's just unapologetic bigotry. Manifest heroism, and Daniel Boone comes to life on the Underwood portable, Norman Rockwell. In this case, we don't have the AI generation of techno-fascist imagery. We've just got a repurposing of a Rockwell painting. Not much of a repurpose, mind you. And of course, the Homeland Security account is also foregrounding the roles of men and women, women, of course, being figured largely as the Statue of Liberty or, vulnerable girls and so on and so forth, and men being presented as strong, virile defenders. Yeah. Protect your homeland. Become a homeland defender today. Join ICE. America calls. For humanity and civilization. So, like I say, I think you can see this kind of stuff everywhere in the world right now. I think it's terrifying. I think it's also kind of difficult to wrap your head around because it's pretty complicated, right? We're talking about people who are in charge of our economic systems, our media systems, our government systems, all working with one another, all doing stuff that has, in some cases, plausible deniability, and in other cases is just really extreme and in your face. Yeah. Elon Musk throws up the Heil Hitler, and he can say he was just sending his heart out to people. Yeah. But something like ICE saying, join ICE and become a homeland defender, and just a little bit out of the corner of your mouth, bash the heads in of the hated other. That stuff is much more on the nose, right? So to think through this, I was so happy to come across this video essay published this year by Alexander Avila, How to Radicalize a Billionaire, the billionaire to techno-fascist pipeline. And I think if we were in class together, excuse me, if we were in class together, I would play you the roughly 20-minute chunk down there from 43 and a half minutes to 1 hour and 3 minutes. It's really good. It's on this guy, Curtis Yarvin. There was a previous section on Nick Land and Mark Fisher. He goes into this interesting ideological intellectual history of techno-fascism, and that's the chunk that I would show as exemplary. But if you're genuinely interested, just watch the whole thing from the start to the finish. It's about 2 hours, and it's an excellent use of your time after this lecture. So I can't do that here. I'm not going to just record a bunch of screen footage and then dump it in. It would make the video way too long. So let's just read an excerpt. This is from towards the end of that time code that I had before. Here is, in a nutshell, what Avila says about techno-fascism. The tech property owning class wants to replace governance with AI, to create a political apparatus controlled and led by tech elites. And if they can't do it within the US government, they will do it in collaboration with the US government, establishing sovereign territories run by crypto, automated policing, millionaire and billionaire rule. This isn't a secret. This was Elon Musk's plan. And even if he and Trump part ways, other tech billionaires are there to take the role. Palantir Technologies, the AI defense company founded by Peter Thiel, has long held defense contracts within the US government. Reports show that the Trump administration is partnering with Palantir to compile a mass database of every American. Palantir's technology gives the Trump administration unprecedented surveillance power, threatening an already fragile democracy. Democracy is an imperfect system. As Curtis Yarvin, who is this, big booster, or this kind of like intellectual guy who's animating a whole bunch of the ideas of, J.D. Vance and Peter Thiel and a whole bunch of others. Watch the video. As Curtis Yarvin writes in his work, neither progressivism nor conservatism, our two biggest constituencies in public life, has any consistent relationship to reality. But Yarvin is mistaken in thinking that the perfect political orientation is one which perfectly correlates with reality. Like all fascists, Yarvin searches for coherence, a politics that ties social life into a neat bow. But the problem isn't that our political ideologies have no consistent relationship to reality. Our problem is that reality itself is, in its essence, inconsistent, dysfunctional, and contingent. The only system that can account for this antagonism, the only one that can contain and wrestle with the inherent dysfunction of social representation, is democracy. I like how Avila articulates this because he puts Yarvin right in there with Peter Thiel and Trump and the rest of them. And in addition to doing that work of showing how, the different parts connect on the corkboard with red string, he also has a very good, I think, reading of what fascism is at its heart. Again, like all fascists, Yarvin searches for coherence. And what I just said about fascism was that it is allergic, constitutively intolerant of difference, right? Of the other. It can't handle something that it can't control, that it can't account for. What fascism wants to do is to close things down, to put things in boxes, to make sure that you are who you say you are and nothing else, right? And so Avila is like, yeah, that's not possible, though. That's just not how the world is. And this is the problem with fascism. This is the problem with libertarianism. It fundamentally misinterprets the nature of the world. So the question is then, why? Why does fascism so consistently need to do that work of misinterpretation? And here again, I want to come back to desire. Fascists want things, right? They want to eliminate the other. Techno-fascists want to take control of the American and eventually global government and, make sure that everyone is subordinate to the interests of global capital. That's what techno-fascists want. So it wants to put the other in this productive place where it's, paying mortgages and ginning up the economic system. Ultimately, though, this is the nature of fascism. It wants something. It wants to repress. It wants to elevate the self over the different. Yeah. And so this is a desire. This is something that fascists want. Another way of putting this is to say that they don't want to have to think very much. They don't want to have to pass judgment on things. Okay, so what do I mean by that? I said earlier that artificial intelligence is about desire. A different way of construing this is to say that artificial intelligence is about avoiding judgment. Artificial intelligence has to do with a relationship to the need to pass judgment on things. Judgment's a pretty broad term, right? What I'm talking about here is the human capacity to look at things in the world and say some of these things are good and some of these things are bad. We should maintain the good, we should probably change the bad, right? Perhaps we need to actually fight the bad. Perhaps it's really, really bad, right? That's what it means to pass judgment. And the thing is, that's like a terrifying prospect, to have to judge others, right? To say, I think that what you are doing is good or bad. I think that the positions you're advocating are good or bad. That's kind of a frightening thing, not least because then you have to stand, right, like behind your judgments. You have to be responsible for them. You have to say, yeah, I thought it was good that ICE was arresting all those people at the border because I was worried about the security of the border, actually. And man, maybe I was wrong about that. That's terrifying. So I think what artificial intelligence does is it says you don't have to do that messy work of thinking and taking responsibility. You don't have to judge stuff. Let me do that. I love this slide that continues to do the rounds on social media from an IBM presentation in 1979. Very simply, a computer can never be held accountable. Therefore, a computer must never make a management decision. Accountability, responsibility, decision, judgment, these things go together, right? Hannah Arendt, arguably one of the best people to write about this subject. She was writing a critique of judgment when she died in 1975, wrote in a piece called Personal Responsibility Under Dictatorship about exactly this. She was doing it in response to her comments on the Eichmann trial in Jerusalem. That was when Adolf Eichmann, who was the one who was directly responsible for sending people in boxcars to concentration camps, was tried for war crimes and hung. And she was there as a reporter, and she wrote a book about it called Eichmann in Jerusalem, in which she posited the idea of the banality of evil, right? That someone could be doing evil things and it could seem completely normal and just a part of their everyday. Eichmann was simply following orders. He was just doing what he was told. How can he be responsible for his actions? That was how he was deflecting. So she received a whole bunch of criticism for this book, and this was one of the essays that she wrote in response to it. So again, 1964, she writes, "There exists in our society a widespread fear of judging that has nothing whatever to do with the biblical judge not, lest ye be judged, And if this fear speaks in terms of casting the first stone, it takes this word in vain. For behind the unwillingness to judge lurks the suspicion that no one is a free agent, and hence the doubt that anyone is responsible or could be expected to answer for what he has done. Judgment and responsibility go hand in hand. They are what make us human, and they're terrifying. And it is so common to flee in the face of that. And what better tool for fleeing in the face of responsibility and the need to judge than artificial intelligence, which promises to judge for you. You don't have to think. You don't have to take responsibility. Just enter a prompt. Okay, last thing. I tossed The Gadget Lover, this 4th chapter from Understanding Media, onto the syllabus kind of on a whim. And today I was just pathetically trying to reconstruct what my head was doing at the time that I came across this and thought, yes, this is the perfect thing to put in the week on AI and techno-fascism. And now I worry that I've extended myself just slightly too far. But here, let me just try to explain what I was doing here and why I want you to read this. So, you all know Narcissus, right? Greek myth. Narcissus sees his reflection in a mirror and misrecognizes the reflection and is so captivated by it that he loses sight of Echo and is captured there for the rest of his days, entranced by his own image. This is the traditional way that the story is told, yeah. And McLuhan in this 4th chapter wants to talk about the myth of Narcissus and refigure it just a little bit. He says, the Greek myth of Narcissus is directly concerned with the fact of human experience, as the word Narcissus indicates. It is from the Greek word narcosis, or numbness. The youth Narcissus mistook his own reflection in the water for another person. This extension of himself by mirror numbed his perceptions until he became the servo-mechanism of his own extended or repeated image. The nymph Echo tried to win his love with fragments of his own speech, but in vain. He was numb. He had adapted to his extension of himself and had become a closed system. In McLuhan's reading of the Greek myth, it's not that he was in love with himself, it's that he was extended into the media. McLuhan is taking the mirror here as a medium, right? Narcissus sees himself, he extends his eyes into this medium, and then he becomes numb, focusing just on it. He forgets about the rest of his body, right? Because he's so wrapped up in the ocular, in the visual. And this, McLuhan says, is what happens to us when we extend our senses into the media, into technology. Like, when you are driving in a car, you sometimes feel as though you are the car. You are the one who is turning to the left or the right. You are the one who is accelerating or braking. You become unaware of your actual body, of your hands on the wheel and your feet on the pedals, because you've become numb to it because you've extended into something else, into the media. So for McLuhan, every act of extension of the senses is also what he refers to as an auto-amputation. It's chopping that sense off and rebalancing the sensorium such that all of your focus is on that extension. You're not paying attention to the rest of your body. And the reason McLuhan says that we do this is, at least in part, to avoid what he refers to as the irritations of the world. We need counter-irritants. The world is too big and complicated and fast. We need cars to navigate it. Cars function as a counter-irritant. So says McLuhan about all this stuff. Okay. So he begins this essay by talking about that stuff and kind of shifting his description of the Narcissus myth a little bit away from the traditional interpretation of it. And then a few pages later, he gets into what this does. So I'm going to read from the top of the second part here. If Narcissus is numbed by his self-amputated image, there is a very good reason for the numbness. There is a close parallel of response between the patterns of physical and psychic trauma or shock. A person suddenly deprived of loved ones and a person who drops a few feet unexpectedly will both register shock. Both the loss of family and a physical fall are extreme instances of amputations of the self. Shock induces a generalized numbness or an increased threshold to all types of perception. The victim seems immune to pain or sense. Battle shock created by violent noise has been adapted for dental use in the device known as Audiac. I want to research this. The patient puts on headphones and turns a dial, raising the noise level to the point that he feels no pain from the drill. The selection of a single sense for intense stimulus, or of a single extended, isolated, or amputated sense in technology, is in part the reason for the numbing effect that technology as such has on its makers and users. For the central nervous system rallies a response of general numbness to the challenge of specialized irritation. The logic, insofar as I can interpret McLuhan here, and I'm not his best reader, is that when we are extending our senses into one of these counter-irritants, like a car or like a mirror or like AI, what we are doing is numbing ourselves to the rest of the world. We're cutting ourselves off, we're separating ourselves from the rest of the world, and we are stuck in a closed system that is not open to all of those problems. We get to run away from those problems. This to me seems a little bit, anyway, like this flight from judgment. And it seems to me that what artificial intelligence is doing is allowing us to numb ourselves, right? To pour our attention, our focus into this auto-amputated self, this part of ourselves that is out there that looks like a mirror of us but is not. And it's at least a balm. At least it gets us away from the troubles of the world. And at least it's pleasant and non-threatening, right? Is this fascist? I don't know. Is AI actually itself fascist? I mean, like, that's what I set out to do here when I was putting these two ideas together. And like I say, I think I bit off more than I can chew, folks. Anyway, so what I'm really interested in hearing from you is, and you know, if the TAs in particular are listening to this, get at me with this. Does the McLuhan reading illuminate anything about this, about AI, about fascism? I'm not convinced. I'm going to have another go at it next semester, and we'll see where it goes. Okay, over an hour. Sorry to keep going on so long. I got caught up. Let's talk about the final assignment, or not the final assignment, the second to last assignment, the AI assignment. This is the only assignment that you're required to use AI for. And as I said at the very first class, the idea here is for you to use AI to make a thing. It doesn't matter what the thing is. What matters is that you know something about the genre that the thing is of. So I've suggested that you could make a list for of music for a wedding, or you could make a Dungeons and Dragons character. You could have AI generate a paper for you, whatever. But you should know something about how to make lists of songs at weddings, or how to make Dungeons and Dragons characters, or how to write a good essay. You should be, if not an expert, at least fairly confident in your apprehension of this particular subject, because what your actual job is to do is not to engineer the prompt properly, it is to assess. Did ChatGPT produce a good essay? Did Midjourney produce a good picture of your character? Did whatever AI system produce a good wedding playlist? And then why or why not? What is it doing? How, based on your interpretation of its output, do you think it came to create that thing? What kind of assumptions about the world must this artificially intelligent system have made for it to have produced that thing? These are the kinds of questions I want you to consider as you're going through this assignment. There's other kinds of questions to ask too. There's many, many, many different ways that this could go. At the end of the day, I want you to assess. Yeah? Why, for instance, I write here, did the program choose this particular phrasing, structure, lighting, or angle? Answering these kinds of questions will probably require you to experiment with the program using alternative prompts. So evaluate the program's output, offering the sort of criticism made by the video essayists whose work is assigned. Pay particular attention to the intended context for the program's output. There was a typo in the syllabus hanging over from a previous iteration of the class. Forgive the struck through portion. The actual AI creation isn't that important, but of course do include it. And the main portion of the work will be graded based on your critical reflection. So if you're doing this one, take the time to write it carefully. And for God's sake, don't use AI to make it. Last but not least, there's just so much more content that I wanted to dive into, and I'm just going to have one more video essay here that I'm going to give a strong recommend to. This is Lily Alexander's Everything is Sludge. It's wonderful, nice and short, and a great explanation of how it's kind of a McLuhan-esque explanation, actually, now that I think about it, how we have become the sex organs of the machine, and how that sucks. It's just not very good. All right, folks, I hope you're staying warm. I'm going to stop this now and upload it as quick as I can.